Well, welcome everybody to the Tourist of Molecules podcast. I'm here with Paul Eftang from Nootropics Depot, one of the most impressive companies in the supplement industry, from a testing perspective, from a quality perspective, but also just with chatting with Paul a little bit before we kicked off, just from a passion perspective. Paul, tell me a bit about where this all started. Obviously that could be a long journey, but give us the bullet points because your journey is really interesting. Your passion is probably unparalleled to any guest I've had. Where's all that coming from, and where did it kick off for you?
Yeah, so I got started as a biohacker. I've been a biohacker, supplement enthusiast. I started out on longevity, and I actually went through a bad depression when I was younger, coming out of high school into college. Right. Almost took my life on a number of occasions. So when I came out of that, I wanted to understand why. Why did my brain work that way? How do I understand my brain, but also enhance it and maybe prevent other people from having to go through the same thing? So I started to, research neurochemistry, psychopharmacology, and that's what led me to longevity. And then eventually I went over to Reddit and got onto the our Nootropics community on Reddit. Wow. And I started interacting with people on the subreddit, and reading research papers, analyzing papers, trying different things out. And after a while, the moderators of the subreddit said, "Hey, we like the way you deal with people on here. Would you like to be a moderator?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I've never been a moderator before, but let's try it out." So I became a moderator of our Nootropics, and at the time, the quality in the space was abysmal. It wasn't just that; it was abysmal. I was buying from the available vendors, and I was getting residual solvent stripping out of it, cat hairs, mislabeled products. There was a couple instances in the our Nootropics community where somebody bought what they thought was one thing. It was mislabeled something else, and they went to the hospital because of it. So I said, wow. Okay, something needs to be done. So I started getting donations from the Reddit community, and I'd go out and I would buy products that people thought were fake or impure. I'd send them to analytical labs, and then I would call the companies out if there was something wrong. And after a while, I decided it didn't help if I'm constantly saying everybody sucks if I don't have anybody to point to and say these guys are good. So that's kind of how I started this company. Was, all right, nobody's really taking lab testing and quality control seriously. Let's build a company that does. And initially, I never planned on building my own lab and building my own manufacturing facility. I was going to use good contract manufacturers, and I was going to use good contract labs, and I was just going to make sure everything was done right. And I really just got lied to over and over and had my trust broken constantly. And I said, okay, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So that's where I built, Omniant Labs and our ISO accredited analytical lab. I built Supplement Logistics, our CGMP certified manufacturing facility. And I said, all right, I'm just going to build teams of people that I can oversee and ensure that the things are being done right. And that's kind of where we are today.
So you're one of the OG. Not a lot of people know this, right? I kind of knew this, but you're one of the OGs from Reddit, and this is a lot of where the entire nootropics movement started back then. Would it be fair to say? Like it was subreddits, it was people using these different compounds, getting these great effects, and then it sort of got popularized over time from that very small community, which you were like embedded in. So Nootropics Depot is really like very connected to that movement that happened. And I remember, obviously some brands eventually picked up nootropics and got it a bit more mainstream, like, Alpha Brain on it. And we'll touch on the Joe Rogans and the different characters, maybe a little bit in this as well. But you were right at the heartbeat of it. But then it's evolved into so much more than nootropics, right? We've got into test boosting herbs and some of my absolute passions as well, which we'll touch on a little bit too, because I'd love to get into the weeds with you on some of that. Tell me a bit about, so with nootropics, that evolved a lot. That's a good example of an industry. And then obviously that, it became something that eventually got regulated, and certain ones you can't get anymore, and certain nootropics you still can. What Back then, obviously, we're talking about piracetam. We're probably talking about Noopept, a lot of things. I mean, in Australia, certainly all those have gone away. Some you might still be able to, work with in the US. What are the current nootropics that you guys primarily have and that are, I suppose, like the most popular or effective that you've been able to keep since that initial era?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I founded Ceretropic too, which was even more advanced side of the nootropics industry. So we were doing nootropic peptides, CMAX, the Lang. We were the first people to do the N-acetyl and amidated peptides. Atomax is my peptide. I created that peptide and named it.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that's mine. Phenylpiracetam hydrazide, we were the first people to do. So we were on like cutting edge of the nootropic side of the industry. And back then it was the early days, right? It was everybody was all working together to try and improve our understanding of these compounds. And some of them have a long history of use in Russia and the post-Soviet countries. Piracetam has been around since the 50s.
Yeah, modafinil. I still get asked for that, every other day at the store. Got any modafinil? It's like, we can't sell that anymore, man. Try some alpha GPC, some CDP. Okay, cool.
Well, I actually made a modified modafinil at one point, synthesized the first time, and it's kind of like halfway between amphetamine and modafinil. Really interesting compound that I took. We've synthesized molecules that we haven't ever even talked about or released. So we made novel peptides that I've tried on myself, made novel synthetic nootropics that nobody else but me has ever tried. So we definitely started out more on the advanced side of the industry. And we kind of made the advanced side of the industry. I was a moderator on our nootropics. I was trying to push for quality. And the limitation to that was, can we trust it, right? If you're going to go out and buy piracetam or aniracetam or Noopept, it's got to be real. So as we, push this paradigm forward of lab testing, quality control, making sure that it's right every time before consumers buy it, then people started to trust it more, and it really helped grow that side of the industry. But over time, I was very naive getting into the industry. I thought I understood the laws and regulations better than I think I actually did. And it was more this sort of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, hey, we can really help people. We can really push this knowledge forward. Let's jump in and do it. And after a while, after a few years, I started to realize maybe I bit off more than I could chew. Maybe there wasn't necessarily a long-term viability to the more synthetic advanced side of the nootropics industry. I think, unfortunately, I thought, well, I'm going to have to go to the natural supplement side of the industry, and it's not going to be as fun. After making novel synthetic peptides and, new synthetic compounds nobody in the world's ever taken, how is nature going to be as interesting? And fortunately for me, it was the exact opposite. Nature has perfected things for millions of years, and there's so many compounds out in nature that we can discover and then perfect further from there, that it's an endless amount of cool, fun, interesting scientific things to work on. So where I thought it was just going to be, all right, well, now I'm going to go sell L-theanine and boring natural supplements, it's actually turned into so much more. And we're doing so much higher level science now than we ever were back in the more advanced Ceretropic days. So it's kind of cool because now I have an endless supply of things to pull from. I can go and get an interesting plant from the jungles of Brazil that hasn't been characterized and go, all right, let's start doing DNA. Let's start, figuring out what the bioactives are. Let's isolate them and make standards. And it's just really an endless supply of fun scientific things that I can work on.
There's so many parallels between your journey and ours on a more microcosm that it's not funny. And I think for a lot of the supplement industry, to be honest, there's a lot of parallels with your journey because, I was always into the natural stuff too. But I had the phase, and with our business, we had similar difficulties with regulatory bodies where the synthetic side became really interesting. And, there was that boom. There was the nootropics boom. There were the muscle builders, and a lot of these things were trending. Now we've got another a boom of that happening. But obviously, people like you and me know a little better from these past experiences. Everyone's talking about peptides now, and that's a story for another day. But essentially, that will be the next thing that probably gets, the same bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people are probably pulling this stuff in from China, doing similar things to what we used to do, and are probably going to unfortunately learn the hard way. And hopefully, if any of them are listening to this, they can hear a bit about some of our journeys too, to understand. Because one thing we touched on before when we were chatting before we hit record is that it's a shame that the industry sometimes doesn't share a lot of the knowledge that can help others avoid some of these very difficult times that you can go through as a business. But that said, the parallel for me is that, I'm so into herbs. And as I said, I was before, but now it is my mainstay. Our store exclusively sells, products that you can sell that don't make claims. And a lot of that's herbs and nootropics too, but obviously the ones that are compliant, similar to what, of course, you have available as well, but probably not to the quality level that you guys produce, which is something that, I think Nootropics Depot really stands apart on. But I mean, test boosting herbs, natural compounds, saffrons and rhodiolas, and a lot of the things that you've been able to get into and really find the components that are moving the needle and making sure that they're in the supplements. That's where we're at too. And I think that's where a lot of Australia's market is headed as well. And consumers are becoming more aware of these things because they have such profound effects as well. What do you think some of the most exciting herbs and nootropics that you guys are able to offer right now, or that you're working on at the moment?
So I think from the more kind of bodybuilding, testosterone, performance side, my favorite product is Tongkat Ali. So Tongkat Ali is one that I personally didn't think was legit at first. I fell into this this online narrative that there are no natural supplements that can increase testosterone. So I never even tried. And I was younger at the time, so there wasn't really a need to. My testosterone was naturally higher, so I never felt the need to go question the online narrative. But I was at Supply Side West one year, and an Indian supplier handed me Tongkat Ali, and I said, "Oh no thanks." I at the time I thought it was more like a gas station boner pill, not legit, not going to do anything real. He's like, no, this is different. This is a standardized extract. Try it. Let me know. And I went back to my room. I weighed it out on my scale. And an hour later, I felt great. Next morning, I woke up. We're back to the show. Took it again. I felt great all day. I'm like, okay, there's something here. And obviously, I didn't know what testosterone levels at the time were. I hadn't done a blood test. But I knew I felt better. I had more energy. I had more motivation. So that set off our development process for Tongkat Ali. And we figured out, okay, what makes a good Tongkat Ali? How can we standardize this so that we can get consistent effects? And that's where we came out with the 2% and the 10% standardized urecomanone. And since then, we've done a ton of research on the other quasinoids in Tongkat, other flavones, other compounds that are in there. But it all comes back to this standardization. You have to standardize some level of bioactive, or else you don't know what effects you're going to get, and you don't know what consistency you're going to get over time. So that's where I think a lot of people, they hear this standardized to bioactive or standardized to urecomanone, and it's like, well, it's not just urecomanone. There's other stuff in Tongkat. Yes, but you have to standardize to some bioactives so that this batch is going to feel the same as this batch, and that batch is going to feel the same as a batch 2 years from now. That way you're not taking something, loving it, coming back to buy a bottle after you run out and going, wait, this doesn't work anymore. Is it me?
Yeah. You don't want the variable to be the herb itself. You know what I mean? Like, you could be more stressed, you could be sleeping less well, you could be, any number of things going on in your life. And one thing you don't want to have to worry about is like batch to batch, and my actually getting the same Tongkat that was helping me get through all this. So it's hugely underrated for how important that is. And probably just consumers don't even think about that there could be variability, but that's something you're able to help circumnavigate.
Yeah. No. So Tongkat Ali, the 10% is what I've taken for years, but we always said we want to develop an optimized Tongkat Ali stack. So we do that a lot. We bring out novel extracts. We usually bring out a few different types because everybody reacts differently to different ones. And then we spend a couple years listening to consumers, listening to our customers say, Here's the effects I got. Here's the blood work that I got. Here's the side effect I got. And it helps us over time to go, how do we then make these better? So that's where we developed Uricomax, our optimized Tongkat Ali stack. We said, okay, Tongkat Ali is very good at raising testosterone, but it can lower estrogen. It can affect cortisol. It can affect prolactin. You know, there's other things to it that you can counteract by taking other things. Let's make a optimized stack for it. And that's what we did with Uricomax.
That's huge because, you know, one of the things we chatted about earlier too is my experiences with Tongkat and the rage that it can provide. And I mean, this is an indication that it's working. You know, Tongkat's been around a long time. Obviously, it blew up massively after Andrew Huberman talked about it. And one thing he probably didn't touch on is the fact that it has this effect in a lot of people. Now, sometimes you need that. You know, you're feeling really flat. When you've got heavy stress, there's nothing more potent than Tongkat to lift you back up. You know, I'm talking about when you're feeling really crushed and beat down. It will give you back your staunch, is the word we use in Australia. I don't know if you've ever heard that word. You feel stoic. You feel very powerful. And so it's like a huge tool to have in your cupboard. And what can happen is when you're good and it's boosted you back up, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this directly, but it can also spill over into this like extra yang energy, you know, to quote maybe the Chinese herbalists, where you can be a little bit snappy, a little bit aggressive in situations where you don't really want to be. You know, you want to deal with customers, you want to have a good experience. So it's always a good time to maybe pull it back out. And I've found that strangely across probably fairly crappy extracts right up to the more standardized ones, but I've never tried yours, to be fair, and I'm sure it would be incredibly potent. But I love that you've then made that stack to balance out some of the different compounds in there, because as we were saying, your take on how it's working, I'd love to get your perspective, because you know, having access to one of the, I guess, the greatest minds in this industry right now is a rare treat for me. I've always thought from the research, part of how this is working is that it might be inhibiting the pituitary where it detects the estrogen levels, right? This is something that can happen when you take certain aromatase inhibitors or SERMs and things. And I've noticed an effect experimenting on those in the past where it has a similar snappiness that I get, but there seems to be so much more going on than that. What do you think about some of the compounds causing that effect where you can feel so aggressive sometimes on Tongkat?
I think a lot of it is a drop in estrogen with concurrent increases in prolactin and drops in cortisol. So it really affects your balance, your HPTA balance. And when you drop estrogen and increase testosterone, you lose that sort of empathy sort of feeling that I think the estrogen can, you know, that motherly sort of empathetic thing that you would associate with estrogen. And it just gives you that aggressive, edgy, motivated, you know, which is useful in a lot of cases. But, you know, when you're sitting at home with your wife and kids and, you know,
and then
kids maybe like breaking something, you know, you can become a little bit more edgy and go maybe snap in ways that you wouldn't otherwise want. So that's where I think leveling out the estrogen, the prolactin, and the cortisol can give you the beneficial effects of the testosterone without those side effects.
Yeah, I've definitely heard the E2 theory before, actually, now that you touched on that. You know, it's squashing down your E2 removes that buffer for the extra aggro. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think a great use case for this, what I see in our store with people that use it, is anyone that's a bit older, some of those rage problems seem to go away. And a lot of those benefits seem to just shine even harder. Like I noticed even their eyes look clearer and more like sharp. It's bizarre. But any guy over 60 seems to benefit more and more and more from Tongkat with less and less need for buffering it or having breaks. Like I still sort of need to. I'm sitting around 45, so I'm not that far behind. Probably being in the boat where I can just have it all the time. But so that might make sense because E2 does increase, I believe, as we age as well, and prolactin. All those things kind of shift in the other direction, and Tongkat probably helps put them back. So that actually makes a lot of sense. It's something I've toyed with the idea on before too. I mean, I still use the herb a lot. I just at this stage will pull it out if I'm getting that sort of rage coming, that yang energy coming through too much. So Okay, it's cool. And so the stack that you put together has more than just the urocominone in it, or like what's some of the things you want?
So we have our 10% urocominone Tonkat extract, but then we also did a cold water ultrasonic extract, so ultrasonic assisted cold water extract to pull over any of the more volatile compounds that you might lose in the more ethanol based 10% extract. So it's two different extracts of Tonkat targeting different quasinoids, different profiles. And then we also have mucunapurians in there, which increases dopamine because dopamine's linked to testosterone.
Yes.
And we have Icarin from horny goatweed in it.
Oh man, this must make you a horny dog. Is like so that must be. I mean, obviously Icarin, as I'm sure some of the listeners will know, is a natural PDE5 inhibitor. It's a very fascinating compound from horny goatweed, which I've actually felt.
Our 10%, it has 10% Icarin, but what we've recently discovered, which we didn't even know, is our 10% has a lot of icaritin or icaricide 2, which is you take Icarin and then it goes to icaricide 2, and then it goes to icaritin. So it's kind of the middle product. Icaricide 2 has a lot of really beneficial effects, and it's more potent than Icarin itself. So our 10% extract, even though it's standardized to 10% Icarin, has a bunch of icaricide 2.
This is a great example of a herb that I'm so glad that you've gotten involved in, because what I've found with Icarin is it varies a lot. I remember when I did my research, it turns out that a lot of it is transferring in the colon to the icaricide 2, I think that you're touching on. And that's where you actually get the benefit from taking the Icarin in the first place. And the variability in that herb, you know, we'll touch on probably a few here where this is the case, is massive. It's one of those ones, and it's similar to Tribulus, which we'll probably bring up in a second as well, where the variability on horny goatweed is so wide open that people would probably sometimes take the herb and think it doesn't really work because, yeah, it says 10% or it says 20%, but there's actually other things going on in the herb. We just only knew about that one so far. And just hearing you touch on that already, I'm like, okay, so he's been in these rabbit holes with the Icarin, because I've had some that really work. And like the way you know it works, I mean, I don't know if I have to break it down for people, but you'll have a better owner. It's not as instantaneous as something like a synthetic, like, you know, Viagra, so on, Cialis. But what it will do is it'll build up in your system, and then you start, from what I understand, in the colon, you're converting a lot of it into the active compounds that your body can start to use as a natural PDE5. And, you know, I've heard estimates of it being around 10%, the potency of a Viagra over time. You know, I can't back that up. It's not like a medical claim, but so to get to that ballpark, it's been hit and miss for me. I find the odd brand that seems to be doing it. I'm like, yes. And then, you know, something will shift, to your point earlier, where same brand, I'm not noticing it anymore. Is it a me thing? Is it their standardization? So the fact that, do you also do just an Icarin on its own, or like a horny goatweed product separately as well?
Yeah. We sell both the 10% Icarin, and we have a 50% Icarin. 50%. Yeah, 50% Icarin.
Yeah.
We tend to do that. A more, you know, a 10% extract is still potent, just like our 2% Tonkat. They're both very potent, but then we go even further and like, how far can we push the potency? Because everybody reacts differently to different concentrations and things. So we have 4 different ashwagandhas that we sell because everybody's different. You know, one supplement might be great for one person, and then the other person hates it.
Absolutely. And then that's what I'm, you know, one of my good friends, Lucas Howen, he's not a fan of ashwagandha, right? For some of those reasons where it can make people a little bit numb. You know, I think it's called anhedonia, can happen over time. I have a different experience with the herb. It can sort of start to blunt me a little too much, and I'll pull it out of my stack, but it literally saved my life. I put it down to that. You know, you talked about some of your struggles early on. And then obviously, you know, you had some similar, you know, run-ins with government regulations and things later on down the track too. We had a similar period. And I used that herb to get through the stress, and it absolutely, I put it as like saved my life. I'm sure I would have maybe made it through without it. Don't get me wrong, but I could sleep again. I could deal with the stress level much better. You know, it was like this constant pressure. I remember saying to you, on the back of my neck, you know, that's how it felt though. And the ashwagandha, just, I was using KSM 66. You know, you've probably got some great extracts that would also work just as well, if not better. But I was able to function. So yeah, it can be a game changer, but like you said, it's different for everyone. If you then take the same doses, I was taking pretty heavy doses to get through that period. If I then took those doses, or someone else did at a different stage in their life, it might be too numbing. You know, you might wake up a little bit sleepy in the morning or something like that. So, you know, that's the other thing to note when working with these herbs, even with Ikarin. I noticed some people might get a headache. I mean, it usually means it's good Ikarin, because it's actually, you know, there's dilation of blood vessels going on, but also they might need just a slightly lower dose, or they might want the 10% as opposed to the 50. So it's really cool that you guys sort of catered, or one, you might want to dose before the deed, the more powerful one, and on a daily basis, you run that at 10% in the stack. So those nuances matter, you know, and I think listeners could really take something away from just bearing that in mind. Okay, that's huge. And then, you know, as I understand it, I mean, when it comes to Tribulus, there's probably one good one out here that I've used. You know, I try a lot of different Tribulus, and I use it in my stack all the time. It tends to get a bad name because, you know, back in the early bodybuilding days, it was like, boost your testosterone by 4,000%. And I think high tech still have one that says something like that, right? And you won't feel that. It's not necessarily actually a testosterone boosting herb. It can do a lot of other things potentially too, but it seems to be the protodiacin content that matters. And I'd chance to guess a lot of these really cheap ones on, you know, iHerb, Amazon, they're not, they'll just say 45% saponins, right? I mean, if you're lucky. And that could mean, it doesn't mean a lot, because you could get a good 45% saponin one and a bad one. It really depends on where they sourced it from.
Well, but when you see that, when you see saponins, like a generic class of things, usually that means they're using UV vis.
Okay.
And when you use UV vis, there's no chromatographic separation. So you're not separating the individual compounds from each other. You're just measuring a bunch of signals that you're like, this is the saponin area. How much of that is in there? And then when you actually go in and measure what are the saponins that I care about, it's way less, if sometimes zero. And that you've found that in the Bacopa side of the industry. The Bacopa side numbers were all via UV vis for a long time, and then started doing HPLC methods for it and going, wait, there's half the amount we've been claiming in here. And Verdure, the Bacchignize, I think it's called Keen Mind in Australia.
Oh yeah,
they were one of the first to come out and say, no, we got to use HPLC to standardize Bacopicides because the UV vis is overstating them. So I think a lot of consumers don't realize that how you measure these things makes a massive difference to what is actually in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a good point out too from you. Saponins doesn't mean individual. Saponin is a very broad term. It's like sort of talking about, you know, terpenes, or it's just a broad term for plant compounds that often have physiological effects, but it's not telling you which saponin. And I believe protodiacin is a saponin. Is that correct? It's like one step down. And so, you know, the only one I ever noticed work does say it's standardized to saponin, to protodiacin content, and it's partially Indian and it's also Bulgarian Tribulus. So, but tell me a bit about your Tribulus, because I mean, I literally can't wait to try it now that, you know, I'm aware that you're doing a Tribulus. Period.
So we have a Tribulus extract that we do. We also have a Diascoria, Diascoria niponica, which is standardized to even more protodiacin. So our Tribulus is standardized to 20% protodiacin. Our Diascoria is standardized to 40% protodiacin.
Is that wild yam?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Wow. Yeah. Wild yam. So our Tribugen product is our optimized Tribulus, which has our Tribulus. It has the Diascoria and some other supporting herbs. And a lot of our customers have come back with blood test results, and they're pretty crazy. So with Tribulus, what we found is it actually is increasing DHT really high. And what a lot of people don't know about DHT is it's much more anabolic than testosterone. So yeah, if you're in a gym, if you're working out, if you're a bodybuilder, you want high levels of DHT because that's really what's going to give you the muscle function. Of course, people that are genetically predisposed to DHT attacking their hair follicles can lose their hair, but there are other things you can take to counteract that while still keeping the beneficial effects of DHT, like a Colonia cava. But so our Tribugen, the last blood test I did, my DHT was at 80 nanograms per deciliter, which the reference range is 40. So I'm double the reference range. And some of our customers have gotten, I think, to like 200 in some cases.
Wow.
And they were taking high dose, like a ton of different capsules, just seeing how far they could push their DHT.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of guys give DHT a bad name.
Yeah.
Low DHT sucks. Low DHT makes you feel like garbage.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can tell stories about that. I mean, I don't care about my follicles anymore. I'd much rather have high DHT than any hair follicles, because I've run Propecia and Finasteride, and it's almost good to know how important DHT is by removing it from your system for a couple of weeks, and then you very quickly start to understand like how cool this metabolite of testosterone is. No libido, can't get a firm erection. Just like you've got a full head of hair with no anything else about you that makes you feel great,
Right.
So it's useless to me, but it was a good experiment to run. But I also find that it seems to be very genetically predisposed. Like, I mean, I think it wouldn't matter too much from a physiological standpoint, raising DHT with a herb like that, for it to then just cause massive hair fall. Pretty unlikely in my book. I think it's different when you talk about, exogenous things. But when the body's naturally producing it, I'm not sure. But the point is, I mean, if that is a concern, then people can, like you said, Colonia cava, that's one I didn't know about for, that kind of circumnavigation. Saw palmetto, there's different things you could try to take to just offset it, but also reap the benefits. But I just think decent DHT is so much more important than worrying about, whatever you're genetically predisposed to and going to deal with anyway.
Right.
I love having high DHT. I think it's just so important, and it's something that I intentionally try to keep in like a healthy range, especially for libido, especially for aggression in the gym and just things where you actually need usable energy from your testosterone. It seems to be like essential. So I'm now desperate to try your versions of this.
So Tribugen's the name of the product. So it's our optimized Tribulus. So you got Uricomax, which is our optimized Tonkat Ali. You got Tribugen, our optimized Tribulus, and then we have Systemax, which is our optimized Cistanche.
Yes. Okay, that's another fascinating herb that definitely, like, there's companies that do it out here. Is there a good one? I don't know. I know, there's a few good herbal brands that are doing probably not like specified extract style ones, like Superfeast blended into some of their blends, and it's great to see it in there. I've had one in the past that felt a bit like Tonkat Ali. It sort of had that sort of upper edge to it, but felt slightly different. It could have been just Tonkat. We still don't really know because we haven't got the testing that you've got. But what sort of effects do you find people get from the Cistanche?
So Cistanche is really nice. It increases testosterone, but it does it in a little bit more indirect way. But it also improves sleep, improves immune function. It's a great overall just immune longevity sleep product that also happens to increase testosterone. So I take our Systemax with our Uricomax so that it helps round out some of the effects of the Tonkat as well. And then women. Yep. So when there's a woman that says, I want to increase my testosterone, I don't normally point her to Tonkat because Tonkat can lower estrogen and women need more estrogen than men. So women, usually I point towards Systemax or Cistanche, and they love the effects because their estrogen is dependent on their testosterone too. Estrogen is made from testosterone. If their testosterone levels are low, their estrogen is going to go low too. So they need to keep their testosterone levels up.
Yep. No, that's, and it's often overlooked, but that's exactly how your body regulates. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your body also uses estrogen levels to detect how much testosterone to make. So that the whole cascade is just so important. It doesn't actually detect your levels of testosterone directly. It goes like, that's why exogenous stuff can throw you out of whack so easily. I mean, it's one of the many reasons. But your body's detecting the back end to know how much to load on the front end. So it's like estrogen's low. Oh, we need to produce a bit more testosterone. Estrogen's high. Oh, he's got plenty. I don't need to make any more. And that's where if you're coming off things like TRT and that balance is so out of whack for a while because it's like, oh, there's heaps of estrogen here. We don't need to make any test at all, and so you need to now take pharmaceuticals to squish that down. Whereas these herbs don't do that. You don't have to worry about those, back end of the chain overloads and so on. Okay, awesome. So Cistanche, I've often also found that Tribulus is really effective for women too. From a libido perspective. Again, women aren't seeking it as much as men tend to, but if it's got a range of other benefits. I think Tribulus, for me, it's always been a great mood booster. It seems to just be a good all-around adaptogen in a lot of ways. I've seen research where it helps with liver protection as well. So I like it for a whole range of reasons. But anytime a female friend or customer has taken Tribulus, they definitely report like a very notice. And Mac is the traditional one that women get recommended for those purposes, but Tribulus is like a game changer. So for anyone trying to maintain that sort of healthy libido and hormonal balance, it's a great option to consider, I think.
Most of the stuff coming out of China is Asian Tribulus. So there's different cultivars of Tribulus, and you hear Bulgarian Tribulus is the best. Bulgarian Tribulus doesn't necessarily mean it's from Bulgaria. There are specific cultivars that were wild in Bulgaria that make protodiosin. And then what we've found in our testing is the Asian Tribuluses, the cultivars, don't make protodiosin. So it'll still test as Tribulus. And if you see a lot of products on the market, they're not making any protodiosin claims. So they're not technically failing for label claim because they're not making any claims. They're just saying it is Tribulus. And okay, it is Tribulus, it's Asian Tribulus, but it's not going to give you any of those benefits unless you have high levels of protodiosin in there.
Yeah, and that's the shame of it, once again, that a lot of people have probably tried Tribulus and written it off because they've had these ones that just have no active compounds that are going to do anything. And they think that's how all Tribulus works, and that's probably part of where it got that sort of, I don't know if it's still got a bad name. I still get people that come in asking for it, but it certainly was one of the first sort of herbs where people are like, it doesn't raise any testosterone at all. And it's, possibly not mechanistically how it works anyway, but it's also probably that they just got some 45% sapin and nondescript, and it could be Asian Tribulus that doesn't have the compounds we need. One that I've noticed, and I know we talked about this a little bit before the pod, that always works for me is bulbine, which I wish had more research done on it. It's I believe it's a South African herb. It definitely raises libido for me without that aggression of Tonkat, but it also it kind of makes like my balls a bit bigger. And I know that sounds a little gross to be sharing from one man to another, but it does. And it did this in the rodent studies as well, although they had some elevated liver enzymes that they weren't super happy with. But there's just the one human study that indicated that wasn't an issue at the doses they were using. It was like 300 milligrams, 600 on some trademark version called Prolensis, which doesn't even exist anymore. So that's part of the problem that you're pointing out. But if you ever did happen to swing past my favorite herb and look into it, man, I'd love to find out what's going on with it, because it really seems to work for me, and it's in a few blends still that companies produce, and it seems to have a fairly reliable effect in people, particularly around libido, but also just like there's a testosterone rise, but it doesn't have that peak to it that something like Tonkat does. So I like to see it in blends, but it's hard to recommend on a broader scale sometimes, because it's sort of like, I think it's good, I tried it, it's good, I'm getting this balls effect, and there's the indicators that I've got, but I don't know what specific compound's doing it. I don't know if it's going to be the same batch to batch and so on. So is that one you've ever heard of, or it's just sort of not as on the radar? Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, we've heard of it. We've looked into it. A lot of what we kind of go down the paths of working on is, do we have access to botanical reference materials? Do we have reference standards for the bioactives? Are there methods out there for assaying these things right now? And then we assess, can we even bring out a product that we know is this species? And without botanical reference materials, it's harder because then we have to go make our own reference, doing DNA and orthogonal analysis. So we've looked into that one before, but there are no BRMs for it. So I think we just put it on the back burner and worked on other projects. But if you think it's something that we should look into and really try, I can pick it back up again.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I don't know if the demand's huge, but it always has had this niche demand. Whereas, like, I've always made sure we stocked it in our store, for example, because of those Examine. It's one of the few times Examine really kind of helped a herb, get some credibility. I think, like, they certainly didn't intend for it, I doubt. But it's got the rodent studies, and people will stumble on them at some point and be like, "What, 300% increase?" And because it had this wild testosterone increase in the rodents, which you wouldn't want in humans anyway. I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like I've got a 300% increase in test, but it's doing the thing that I love for a libido boosting, feel good test boosting herb to do, and it does it really. It complements really well with Tribulus too. They seem to bounce off each other nicely. So yeah, I mean, I'd flag it as one of my faves, and I'm an absolute test boosting herb fanatic. That's why this pod's drifted towards these are the fact that you have gone this deep into my favorite herbs is just it's a treat for me. Like, it's like Christmas talking about this stuff. I can't talk to my wife about these herbs, she gets a little bored, understandably. Okay, and then that brings me to, like, there's one more I want to talk to you about on the test boosting herb side, and then we can talk about, like, what's new, what's happening with you, and go from there. But Fedosia agrestis. So this is one I've been dying to bring up. I know you've got some opinions on it too, so it'd be great to get your perspective. But it was one of those classic examples. I used to be working on a brand, and in the future I'll be working on some more down the track. But this one's been packed up for now. But what we did do is we did a Fedosia agrestis, and we tried every sample that you could get from China. 20 to 1, 200 to 1, 100 to 1, stem, leaf, root. There was these different parts of the plant. They all had slightly different colorings. All tasted like burnt rubber. And what I noticed through the product development and, after using it, I felt great for the first week or so. Huge libido boost, very bitter herb though. So it needed to be encapsulated. But then this massive diarrhea, this laxative effect started to kick in. It took me a while to kind of pinpoint it, because there's a few things I'm always taking, much like yourself. I'm sure there's a fair bit in your stack. But once I did, I realized how reliably it would just cause this massive laxative effect. Then there was the concerns that there's still to this day been no human study on it, as far as I know, unless something's come out in the last 5 minutes. And it didn't seem to matter what type I used, what brand I used. So we still sell it at the store. It's still a herb, not our own brand of it, but we sell other brands because people come in wanting it because of Andrew Huberman sort of talking about it and so on. And I always give them the proviso, because I just don't want them to have this effect and then not know what it's coming from. It's really inconvenient. And they blame everything first, right? Like sucralose, the chicken they had for dinner, and it's like, dude, it's the Fedosia. This could happen to you in a week or two. I just want you to be aware of it, because I don't want you to have a bad time, man. What's your take on Fedosia?
So Fedosia was one. Some of our customers kept asking us, "Hey, look into Fedosia. Look into this." We started doing research on it, and I started getting into the available animal studies, and they were concerning for a number of reasons. So there were a couple animal studies that showed potential renal and testicular toxicity. And of course, it's an animal study. It doesn't necessarily translate to humans. Sometimes humans are a little bit more resilient than the rats studied or the mice. But generally, you can look at the mechanisms, and if they go deep enough to figure out what enzyme it's affecting, what the actual specific mechanism is, you can go, is that something that humans also have to worry about? And the mechanism behind the potential renal and testicular toxicity with Fedosia is absolutely something that humans share with rats. So it was one of these things where I'm like, all right, it's definitely toxic in rats. The same enzyme is present in humans. It's probably toxic in humans. We don't have any safety data to show it's not. So I'm not personally comfortable selling it or taking it myself. But also, there are no botanical reference materials for it. There wasn't at the time. There is now. We worked with Chromadex to make some. But at the time, when Huberman went on Rogan, there were no BRMs. So you couldn't sell something and say, this is Fedosia, and have testing to prove it was. So Huberman went on Rogan, talked about Tongkat Ali, talked about Fedosia. They blew up overnight. And overnight, like, Fedosia is from West Africa. It's difficult to grow. It's from a very small region. Africa is Africa. So there's not really a good supply chain there. Huberman goes on Rogan, blows up overnight, and then everybody in China is reaching out to us saying, Do you want Fedosia? Do you want Fedosia? And I'm like, you didn't have Fedosia 2 days ago. You didn't even know what Fedosia was. Now you have the best Fedosia in the world overnight because Huberman went on Rogan. So, and then everybody and their mother in the industry started selling Fedosia, including Huberman on his own brand, Momentous. And I'm sitting here on Reddit, I could have made a lot of money bringing out a Fedosia at the time. Things were flying off the shelf because of that episode. And I refused to because I couldn't prove that it was Fedosia. And even if it was Fedosia, I couldn't prove it was safe. And if I'm not comfortable putting it into my body, I'm not going to sell it to someone else. Everything we sell on our site, I'd taken at least once. But most of the stuff I take regularly. So, if it's something where I'm like, I'm a little bit worried, I'm not going to take it, there's no way I'm going to sell it to someone else and be like, well, that guy can have it if he wants it. So I think this industry has kind of morphed into, it started, the early days of the supplement industry were very much biohackers, hey, look at these plants from traditional Chinese medicine, from Ayurveda, from Brazil, from these other areas. And it was people that were passionate about it, that were trying to get these botanicals out. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in the supplement industry today are in it for profit. They're just in it to make as much money as possible. And Fedosia was kind of one of those waves that Huberman went on Rogan. It started this hype cycle, and everybody wanted a piece of this hype cycle. And I just chose to stay out of it because I couldn't verify it. I couldn't ensure it was safe. So I said, I'm just not going to do it. But we still worked in the background with Chromadex to make a standard. Chromadex brought out a botanical reference material for Fedosia. And then we went out and we bought all the Fedosia on the market and tested it. And sure enough, almost all of it was fake. Wasn't Fedosia, including the Momentous stuff that Huberman was promoting at the time. So what I knew to be true was true. Like, there's no way you can set up a reliable supply chain out of a small West African country overnight just because somebody goes on Rogan. It was China doing what China does and said, well, people are asking for Fedosia, let's give them Fedosia.
Absolutely.
It just wasn't Fedosia. So I think it's part of a larger microcosm around this supplement industry of, hey, this is a hype thing right now. Let's ride this wave as long as we can. Does it work? Who knows? Is it real? Who knows? Is it safe? Who knows? But it doesn't matter because we'll make a lot of money in the short term, and then we'll get out of it, and nothing really will happen to us because of it.
Yeah, and we need to evolve past that. I mean, and I know it's something that we've talked about before, but it's not like this industry isn't heavily regulated. It's probably one of the most heavily regulated in the world, but there's still so many holes that need plugging. I mean, when it comes to your breakfast cereal, the toothpaste you're using, is the regulation as high as the supplement industry? Probably not. I don't think they're third party testing the cereal we're eating. I'm not. And so we become this great place to kind of point a finger at. It's like this industry is dodgy. It's sort of like, I don't think we're any dodgier than any other industry. We've just had it more scrutinized and brought to light than a lot of other industries, and rightly so. So I don't want consumers to think that, you shouldn't supplement. I think you definitely should, but I think the work you're doing and, some of this knowledge that's starting to come out about what a good supplement is, what it looks like, what a good brand is, and at least if they're going to the steps, COAs can be faked, as we've talked about in the past.
Often are.
And they often are. But if they've gone to the trouble of that, because they've got a good reputation in the industry, if they're on podcasts like you as a founder and, owner of the company, putting yourself out there, putting your word to things and describing the processes that you're going through. And I mean, building everything that you built out, for example, these are all just good signs, good things to be looking for rather than just a really low price point and the word that you were looking for, Tribulus or whatever it is, NMN, and so on. I'm sure that that's a whole other thing, the anti-aging sort of the route as well, which we could definitely talk about on another podcast too. So that's huge, man. It's really commendable what you're sort of doing for the industry. And I think seeing you emerge into the forefront, more on that sort of price plow content and getting to know, the person behind this incredible brand is just so valuable. And I'm so glad that you've started doing it. I know it's like a lot of extra work to try to get on all these different pods and things and share this message. So I guess one last thing before we kind of wrap. Maybe just tell me a bit about what you're working on right now. Is there any kind of new things that you can discuss, and things that you want to sort of let us know about, that you're working on in the background?
Yeah, so we're actually about to release a fiber, and a lot of what we do these days, for the whole life of the company, but specifically these days, is I want to develop a new supplement for myself. So we get down into the science, we start going through our R&D, we start trying to figure out how do we make the best version of this because I want it. So I started to see the instances of colon cancer and rectal cancer rising in younger people, and it's getting younger and younger and younger. James Vanderbeek from Dawson's Creek just died, and he's 48 years old, left 6 kids. People are dying in their 40s now from colon and rectal cancer, and it's really tied to a lack of fiber in your diet. And I think the problem is all of us kind of grew up seeing Metamucil commercials, seeing old people dump Metamucil into their cups and going, oh, well, that's not me. I'm not old. I don't need Metamucil. And I think it really maybe gave us this perception about fiber that is not proper. It's not just a way to keep you regular. Fiber is what probiotics eat. And there's insoluble, non-fermentable fibers that give bulk to your stool. You need those too. We have our fiber that's coming out has 11 different fibers. We have a 50-50 blend of insoluble and soluble, and it's a 76% fermentable though. So it's a lot of them that can ferment different probiotics, and each strain of probiotics eats different things. So it's not just about taking a fiber supplement and you get a number on the label that says, oh, I'm getting 10 grams fiber, because you might be getting 10 grams insoluble, non-fermentable fiber, which will help you, but it's not going to do what is necessary to feed your microbiome. Yeah. And that's really what it's all about, is feeding your microbiome, getting your probiotics in your system in a healthy state. And 97% of Americans are deficient in fiber. 97%. Like, it's basically everybody. You can walk outside and point at anybody and they are deficient in fiber. And a lot of it is the new carnivore diets, the ketogenic diets, before that, the Atkins diets, these high protein, high fat, low carb diets, which admittedly, I think we went too crazy on the carbs for a while. And then now it's corrected back the other way. But as part of this reducing carbs, people have lost all of the fiber in their diet too. So, and look, my uncle used to say that salad isn't food, salad is what food eats. And he would never eat a vegetable. He would just eat meat. Right. So, especially in the United States, it's a very common thing for men in the United States to go, oh, I'm not going to eat a salad. I'm not a woman. I only eat red meat. Yeah. And now young men are dying from colon cancer. And I think a lot of people need to realize it ties back to fiber. And it's about having a comprehensive fiber in your diet that feeds your probiotics and keeps you from getting these polyps in your colon and your rectum that then mutate and then they become cancerous. And this happens a lot earlier than a lot of people think. Everybody always thought, well, colon cancer was something you had to deal with when you're 70. These polyps start forming when you're 36, 37, 38 years old. And they may not become cancerous at that time, but by the time you're 40, 41, 42, 43, as James Vanderbeek, he was 48 when he died. He only learned about his colon and rectal cancer, I believe, a year and a half ago. A year and a half. So he learned he had colon cancer and then died a year and a half later, and he's 48. And he's a wealthy, famous person. If it can happen to a wealthy, famous Hollywood star, it can happen to anyone. So absolutely. I think what we really need to get out there, we're going to be doing a big push when we release our fiber, is educating consumers, especially younger consumers, on this isn't just an old person thing. This is something that you need to correct now, or you might find yourself in the same position where you're in your late 40s and then you die of colon cancer and leave your family behind because you didn't take your diet seriously. Yeah. So I'm super passionate about that because I started seeing these high profile deaths and seeing these research papers coming out saying colon cancer is hitting younger and younger people. And I said, I'm not getting enough fiber. I'm guilty of it too. You know, I'm having mostly protein and more ketogenic, and I intermittent fast. So I eat once a day.
Yep.
I basically eat in a 2-hour eating window and fast 22 hours of the day. So for me to be able to get enough fiber in my day, I have to get 38 grams of fiber as a man to hit my RDA. 38 grams of fiber is very hard to get when you're intermittent fasting. I have one meal to get that much fiber. It's almost impossible without supplementation. So I said, okay, I need to develop the best fiber possible so that I can take it. And my wife too. My wife started having fears. She's like, maybe I'm having colon issues. I need to get into the doctor. I'm like, all right, I own a R&D company and a supplement company. There's no excuse for me not to be getting enough fiber. We need to do this. And I think hearing it from someone that maybe is a little bit younger, I'm 40 now. You got to take this stuff seriously. Like we hear it all when we're young, and I think we hear it so much that we just kind of go, oh yeah. And then by the time where we really need to start taking it seriously, we just haven't. And then by the time we realize, oh shit, I should have, it's too late. Yep. So I think there needs to be a really big push right now out there. It's such a simple thing to change. It's fiber, right? Yep. It's not scary. It's not something super advanced or requiring a ton of research. It's fiber.
No. Yep. And it's easy to consume. You know, you just drink it down, put it in with your, you know, whatever your nighttime little beverage is with a few supplements or whatever, and get it in, or, you know, in your case, in your you know, your eating window. And it does its good.
The crazy thing is a lot of these younger people are health nuts. You know, they're in the gym. They're not overweight. They're looking at their diet, but maybe they're doing more ketogenic. And they just don't realize, hey, I'm trying to be healthy, and they don't realize what they're actually doing to their body by missing this crucial nutrient.
Absolutely. It's often very aesthetic, but we're not looking at the internal aspect of health as well. You know, and I think that's an important thing to call out. I mean, you know, fitness industry is kind of notorious for it, right? A lot of the idolized people are bodybuilders that are taking exogenous things and things that won't necessarily expand your lifespan. So we've got to get this narrative out there a little bit more and talk about health span. And, you know, I think that's awesome, man. I'm a big fan of fiber. You know, it may not be as sexy as, you know, the massive increases in testosterone. I remember there was a story you told me before we hit record about there's an older guy that you work with that used to be like a Mr. Universe, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that one before we wrap? That's a huge.
Yeah. So Lance Strayer, he's on our scientific advisory board.
Right.
He is a 2-time former Mr. Universe, Mr. USA. He beat Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s. Wow. So yeah, he's from that time period. He's 70 years old now. He got his PhD in nutritional counseling, and he teaches baby boomers how to eat right, work out, be healthy, and live a longer life. And he has a radio show here in Arizona. And I go on once a month and kind of talk to his listeners live on the radio about all of these different things. And I started to talk about Tongkat Ali and Cistanche and testosterone, and how I think it's crazy that every dude over 40 in the United States is getting put on TRT that they become dependent on for life. Yeah. And he started listening to me going, okay, because he thought all these natural testosterone supplements were bullshit. There's a sponsor on his show that puts a advertisement on that says "Get the real thing," and it's a TRT clinic. So he was kind of in this mindset. He was on TRT. He had TRT pellets in his butt. His doctor had him on it. He just was in this normal thought process that I think a lot of Americans are. If you want to increase your testosterone, you need to be on TRT. Well, he kept hearing me talk about this and hearing me be very passionate about how I think it's insane that we're telling every American man over 40 in the United States that they're fundamentally broken and need to have their testosterone replaced. So he said, you know what? Send me some of your Tongkat and Cistanche, and I'm going to try it. And with the TRT pellets, you get them put in every 6 months. And he was about 5 months in. He started taking our Tongkat and our Cistanche, and then at the 6-month mark, went into his doctor for blood testing to see if it was time to put TRT pellets in. And the doctor came out after the results came and said, "What the hell are you doing? What are you taking?" He's like, "What do you mean? I'm not taking anything," being coy. And the doctor's like, "Your total testosterone is 2,100. your free testosterone is 150.
That's massive. And for people listening at home, 400 is common, right? 800 at best.
Well, 400 for a normal middle-aged guy. A 70-year-old, your testosterone drops. So 2,100 for a 70-year-old is insane. I've never even seen anyone with 2,100, much less a 70-year-old.
Yeah.
So obviously he was coming off the tail end of the TRT pellets. There was still some leftover from that.
Yeah.
So then he's like, okay, I'll go another month. I'm not going to do TRT anymore. I'm just going to take Tonkat and Cistanche. And then he goes back in, and now he's leveled out around 1,000 total and 110 free, which for a 70-year-old natural.
Yeah. Mine's probably lower than that. Like almost 70,
Mine's at like 900 total and I think 98 free. So he's 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And he works out more than I do. His job is going and being in the gym with baby boomers all day, and mine's jumping from meeting to meeting, running a 90-person supplement company. So I don't.
Yeah.
But so I love telling that story because we actually had a caller while we were live on the radio. Caller call into the radio station, and he said, "Hey, I've been listening to your episode. My doctor told me that as you get older, your body just stops producing testosterone, and it just can't produce it anymore. So what do you have to say about that?" I'm like, well, that's not right. If it was right, Lance wouldn't be able to make 1,000 total testosterone naturally here at 70 years old. What happens, though, is you get into this cycle of poor diet, bad sleep. Your sleep goes down, your testosterone goes down, your stress goes up, your testosterone goes down. And then you get a blood test and you get these doctors saying, you're low on testosterone, let's get you on TRT. And then once you get on TRT, if you're on long enough, your body will shut down. Yeah. And that's not your body just stops being able to make testosterone. You made it stop making testosterone. Yeah, exactly. You exogenously caused that. So, but I think just a lot of men, most men, at least in the United States, just aren't informed about testosterone. And they're not informed that there's a different way. You shouldn't immediately go to this level low, let's replace it. Let's figure out why that level's low. Maybe correct if your sleep's bad, correct some other things first. And maybe you don't even need to go, with Tongkat Ali, but certainly jump to Tongkat Ali first before you would ever go to TRT. See if your body can still make it.
Absolutely, because there's just so many benefits to making it endogenously with these herbs that people probably don't know about. The spillover effect of having too much exogenous testosterone can then raise E2, raise prolactin, all the things that start to push you out of that Goldilocks zone where you were feeling great. And what most people then do is start injecting more testosterone, which exacerbates the issue. And you're losing libido now, you're getting estrogen overflow and a whole range of things. So it's not as simple of a fix as it seems. Whereas taking the herbs, that you can take things to help with free testosterone, raising testosterone, the same herbs you probably take to help support the injectable test if you get too much SHBG, which will raise up and grab all the test. And when it's not free test, it's not usable test, as a lot of us now know. Paul, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for coming on and giving me so much of your time. We definitely have to do this again soon. When you get more time, we'll talk about some nootropics, whatever's new with you, because you guys are always innovating. But I just want to, thank you one more time for being that voice in the industry and that sort of pioneer for getting these extractions right, calling out some of the industry BS and just sort of showing the way, setting the example. Because I think it takes a lot of guts to do that. And not a lot of people realize there's not a lot of thank yous that you get from an industry when you're trying to make it better. But later you get sometimes regarded as someone that did some great things. So if you needed a reminder of that today, that's me giving it to you.
Thank you.
And no, my pleasure, man. I hope you have a great day and we'll speak again soon, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Anytime. And look, last thing, anyone that wants to get on and get some of these great herbs, Nootropics Depot, they ship worldwide, a couple of countries that are in conflict or whatever, Ukraine and Russia, maybe not, but Australia, New Zealand, wherever you're sort of listening to this from, you can get access to these great products. And if you want to learn more, jump over to their Instagram or their webpage and link up with Nootropics Depot.
Awesome.
Thanks again, man. Speak soon.